The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Tucson's dusty main street as Carolyn Carter made her way to the courthouse, her boots clicking against the wooden boardwalk. As the daughter of the territory's most renowned prosecutor, she'd grown accustomed to the whispers that followed her through town. Today, though, the whispers carried a different tone. Her father, Joshua Carter's sudden death had transformed her from a respected lady into something far more intriguing, the sole heir to whatever secrets the old lawman had kept. The courthouse stood like a weathered sentinel at the edge of town, its facade yellowed by decades of desert winds. Caroline paused at the base of the steps, adjusting the black morning dress that felt as heavy as the responsibility now weighing on her shoulders. Inside, Nathan Hall, her father's longtime clerk, waited with the contents of the office safe. Papers that would reveal whether Joshua Carter had left behind more than just his sterling reputation. "Miss Carter," Nathan greeted her, his lined face grave beneath his wire-rimmed spectacles. "I know this isn't easy, but there are matters that require immediate attention." He gestured to a leather portfolio on the desk, its edges cracked and worn. Caroline noticed his hands trembling slightly as he reached for it. Something about his manner suggested he knew more than he was saying. The portfolio contained what appeared to be standard legal documents, but tucked between them was a carefully folded piece of parchment that made Caroline's breath catch. The yellowed paper bore intricate markings. A map, she realized, with annotations in her father's precise handwriting. In the corner, a name was written, La Mina del Sol, the mine of the sun. Nathan cleared his throat nervously. "Your father never spoke of this, but 15 years ago he prosecuted a group of Mexican bandits led by Isaac Lopez. Before their capture, they discovered something in the Catalina Mountains, a lost Spanish gold mine. The map was evidence, but it never appeared in court. Your father?" He hesitated. "He kept it safe, knowing someday it might be needed." Caroline's mind raced to the implications. She'd heard whispers of the Lopez gang, how they'd terrorized the territory until her father brought them to justice. Now she held the secret they'd died protecting, or so everyone thought. "The gang members," she said slowly. "Are they still alive?" "3 survived the prison term," Nathan replied, his voice dropping. "They were released last month. Word is they've been asking questions around town, looking for something they lost." "Your father's death?" "It wasn't the fever like the doctor claimed. He was murdered the day after they arrived in Tucson." The revelation hit Caroline like a physical blow. She sank into her father's old chair, the leather creaking beneath her. Through the office window, she could see the Catalina Mountains rising purple against the evening sky. Somewhere in those peaks lay a fortune in Spanish gold, and the truth about her father's death. "There's more," Nathan continued, pulling a letter from the portfolio. "Your father left instructions. The mine's location is split between that map and another document hidden with someone he trusted, a man named Luke Allen, who runs a silver operation near Pueblo. The Lopez gang won't find the mine without both pieces." Caroline studied the map's cryptic markings, her mind already forming a plan. "The Lopez gang will come for this," she said quietly. "They'll assume I know nothing, that I'm just a grieving daughter who'll hand over anything they demand. But they're wrong." She stood, carefully folding the map. "I'm going to find that mine, Mr. Hall, not for the gold, but for justice." Nathan's expression shifted to one of alarm. "Miss Carter, these are dangerous men. Your father would want you safe, not pursuing vengeance." But he could see the determination hardening in her eyes, the same look he'd seen countless times in Joshua Carter's face when justice hung in the balance. "I'm not seeking vengeance," Caroline replied, tucking the map into her reticule. "I'm seeking truth. The mine is the key to understanding why my father died, and why he kept this secret for 15 years. But first, I need to reach Luke Allen before the Lopez gang realizes what I have." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Thank you, Mr. Hall. I trust you'll keep our discussion private." As Caroline stepped back into the fading daylight, her mind was already racing ahead. She would need supplies, a horse, and most importantly, allies she could trust. The Lopez gang knew these mountains, knew the secrets they held. To survive what was coming, she might have to make dangerous choices, including whether to trust the very men her father had sent to prison. The sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Caroline Carter walked purposefully toward the livery stable, her father's map secure against her heart, while somewhere in Tucson's growing shadows, three desperate men plotted their own path to redemption or revenge. The game was beginning, and the stakes were higher than mere gold. The livery stable's weathered doors creaked as Caroline entered, the scent of hay and leather filling her nostrils. Old Isaac, the stable master, looked up from mending a saddle, his weathered face creasing with concern. He'd known her father well, had watched Caroline grow from a pig-tailed girl into the determined woman who now stood before him. "Miss Carter," he said quietly, "you've got that same look your father used to get when trouble was brewing." Caroline selected her words carefully, knowing Isaac's tendency to worry. "I need your best horse, Isaac. Something with endurance for mountain trails. And I need to know where I might find Luke Allen these days." She busied herself examining the tack hanging on the wall, avoiding the old man's shrewd gaze. "Luke's been working security for the Silver Creek mine, about 2 days' ride north," Isaac replied, setting aside his tools. "But Miss Caroline, those mountains ain't safe right now. Word is the Lopez boys broke out of Yuma prison last week. 3 of them made it, and they've got scores to settle." His arthritic fingers worried at a piece of leather as he spoke. The news confirmed Caroline's fears. The gang was already free. She'd hoped for more time, but fate rarely dealt convenient hands. "The Silver Creek mine," she repeated, committing the location to memory. "I'll need provisions for at least a week. And Isaac? I'd appreciate your discretion about my destination." Outside the stable, the evening air had grown cooler, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. Caroline led her newly acquired mount, a sturdy bay gelding, toward the general store. She needed to move quickly, but rushing would only draw attention. The town's few gas lamps were being lit, their pale glow creating islands of light in the gathering dusk. Inside the store, Charlotte, the owner's wife, was closing up for the day. She paused in her sweeping when Caroline entered, noting the determined set of the younger woman's jaw. "You're out late, Caroline. Your father used to say nothing good happens after sunset in mining country." Caroline managed to smile while gathering supplies. Dried beef, coffee, hardtack, ammunition for her father's old Colt. "Sometimes the night is the best time to start a journey, Mrs. Charlotte, especially when you're following in someone else's footsteps." She added a heavy wool blanket to her purchases, knowing the mountain nights would be bitter. As she packed her saddlebags outside, movement caught her eye. A shadow where there shouldn't be one, between the assayer's office and the bank. Caroline kept her movement steady, but her heart quickened. The Lopez gang wouldn't be far behind her now. They'd been watching, waiting for someone to reveal knowledge of the map's existence. She mounted smoothly, adjusting her skirts with practiced ease. A woman riding astride might draw attention, but split skirts and a proper saddle would have to do. Propriety took second place to survival in the territories. The bay's hooves echoed on the packed earth as she guided him toward the north road. Behind her, Tucson settled into its evening routine. Piano music drifting from the saloon, miners trudging home from their shifts, shopkeepers securing their doors against the night. Caroline resisted the urge to look back. Home was behind her now, and ahead lay a wilderness of stone and shadow where her father's killer might be waiting with the Lopez gang. The moon rose as she cleared the town limits, casting silver light across the saguaros and revealing the jagged peaks ahead. The map pressed against her ribs seemed to pulse with each hoofbeat, a reminder of everything at stake. Luke Allen was her best hope now, if she could reach him before the others did. The night wind carried the cry of a distant coyote, and Caroline urged her mount to a faster pace. She had 2 days to reach Silver Creek Mine, to find Luke, and to unravel the mystery that had cost her father his life. The Lopez gang might know these mountains, but she had something they didn't. The truth about what happened 15 years ago, locked away in her father's final letter. The trail ahead wound through shadow and starlight, each turn holding the possibility of ambush or revelation. Caroline settled into the rhythm of the horse's gait, one hand near her father's colt, the other holding the reins steady. The game had indeed begun, but she was no longer just a prosecutor's daughter. She was a player in her own right, and she intended to see it through to the end. Caroline Hall wiped dust from the grimy window of her father's study in Pueblo, watching storm clouds gather over the distant peaks. 6 months had passed since Judge Nathan Hall's death, yet his presence still lingered in every leather-bound law book and weathered case file. The envelope she'd discovered hidden behind his portrait that morning weighed heavy in her apron pocket. A crude map sketched on yellowed parchment, along with a letter that had shattered everything she thought she knew about her father's final case. The map led to the legendary Lost Padre Mine, a treasure trove of Spanish gold that had claimed countless lives in the jagged Apache territories. But it was the letter that truly haunted her. Her father had wrongly convicted 3 Mexican miners, the Lopez brothers, sending them to Yuma prison for a crime they hadn't committed. The real murderers had threatened to expose the judge's own past indiscretions if he didn't comply. Now those same men controlled Pueblo's richest silver mine through violence and corruption. Caroline's hands trembled as she reread the confession. Her father had tried to make things right before his death, secretly arranging the Lopez brothers' release. But the pardon papers vanished the night he died, leaving the innocent men to rot. The map was meant to be their compensation, a chance at the fortune they deserved. Instead, it had become her inheritance, along with the crushing weight of her father's guilt. Thunder rolled across the valley as Caroline packed her saddlebags. She knew seeking out recently released convicts was madness, but she couldn't live with her father's shame. The Lopez brothers had the mining expertise to find the lost treasure, if they didn't kill her first. Her childhood friend Joshua Carter had warned her that the eldest brother, Isaac Lopez, had sworn vengeance on the Hall family. But redemption rarely came without risk. The storm broke as Caroline rode toward the territorial prison, rain drumming against her oilskin coat. Lightning illuminated the forbidding adobe walls where 3 innocent men had spent 5 years in chains. Guard Luke Nelson recognized her from her father's visits and reluctantly confirmed that the Lopez brothers had been released 2 days prior. They'd headed east, toward the old Mission ruins where outlaws gathered to plan raids on the silver shipments. Caroline found them in a crumbling chapel, 3 dark figures huddled around a guttering candle. Isaac Lopez's eyes blazed with hatred when she stepped into the light, but his brothers Caleb and Joshua held him back. She placed the map on the altar between them, along with her father's confession. "I can't undo what was done to you," she said quietly, "but I can help you claim what you're owed, if you're willing to trust the daughter of the man who betrayed you." Isaac spat on the floor, but Caleb studied the map with keen interest. The youngest brother had been a renowned mine engineer before his imprisonment. "The Lost Padre," he whispered. "I searched for it before. Before everything. These markings, they match the old Spanish chronicles, but the mine lies deep in Apache territory. We'd need supplies, horses, weapons." "I have money," Caroline replied, "and contacts in Tucson who can outfit us properly. But we'll need to move fast. The men who framed you control this region now. If they learn about the map, they'll send hunters after us." She didn't mention that Joshua Carter had already warned her about armed riders asking questions in town. The race for the lost mine had begun whether they were ready or not. Charlotte Nelson burst into the chapel, her face flushed with urgency. The sheriff's daughter had been Caroline's closest friend since childhood, and now served as her eyes and ears in town. "Riders coming," she panted. "A dozen men, heavily armed. They're checking all the buildings along the old Mission road." Isaac cursed in Spanish, grabbing for his pistol. But Caleb raised his hand for silence, tilting his head to listen to the approaching hoofbeats. They slipped out through a hidden tunnel as torchlight flickered at the chapel windows. Caroline's heart pounded as they emerged in a narrow box canyon, the storm still raging overhead. She had chosen her path, casting her lot with condemned men in pursuit of redemption and riches. But as they rode hard through the darkness, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had set in motion events that would change all their lives forever. The Lost Padre mine had claimed many souls over the centuries. She prayed it wouldn't claim theirs as well. Eleanor Carter watched them go from the Mission Bell Tower, her brother Joshua's spyglass trained on the fleeing riders. As the wife of Pueblo's most powerful mine owner, she knew her husband would stop at nothing to claim the lost Spanish gold. But she also knew the truth about Nathan Hall's death, and the dark secrets that could destroy everything her family had built. She had a choice to make, and precious little time to make it. The storm raged on as Caroline led her unlikely allies east toward Apache country. Behind them, Eleanor Carter penned a letter that would spark a war for control of the Lost Padre's legendary riches. Ahead lay treacherous mountains, hostile tribes, and the ghosts of centuries of failed expeditions. But Caroline Hall had inherited more than just a map from her father. She had inherited his determination to see justice done, no matter the cost. The next few days would test that resolve to its very limits. The first rays of dawn painted the mountains in shades of amber, and rose as Caroline's group picked their way through a narrow pass. Isaac, the youngest of the former bandits, led them along a barely visible trail he swore would keep them hidden from both Apache scouts and Eleanor Carter's hired guns. The path wound through towering granite walls streaked with quartz, a reminder of the mineral wealth that had drawn so many fortune seekers to their doom in these treacherous heights. Caroline studied the weathered map by firelight each evening, comparing its faded landmarks to the terrain around them. Her father's precise notations in the margins spoke of Spanish mission ruins and ancient Apache burial grounds, places that could guide them to the mine if they could only decipher their meaning. But Nathan Hall had written in a complex code, and each revelation only led to more questions. The sound of distant hoofbeats sent them scrambling for cover one afternoon, pressing themselves against lichen-covered rocks as a patrol of Carter's men passed below. Caroline caught Luke's eye across the gap between their hiding spots, seeing her own tension mirrored in his face. The former bandit leader had proven surprisingly honorable since their escape from Pueblo, though she still struggled to reconcile this man with the one her father had prosecuted. That night, huddled around a tiny fire screened by boulders, Caleb shared what he'd overheard in prison about Eleanor Carter's past. The mine owner's wife had once been engaged to Nathan Hall himself, before ambition led her to make a different choice. Caroline absorbed this revelation in silence, wondering if it explained the strange mix of hatred and guilt she'd seen in Eleanor's eyes during their last confrontation in Pueblo. The next morning brought them to the edges of Apache territory proper. Ancient pictographs adorned the cliff faces, warning away intruders in a language of faded ochre and blood-red symbols. Luke pointed out fresh signs of tribal movements: broken branches, scattered ashes, the impression of unshod hooves in sandy soil. They would need to proceed with extreme caution now, as much to avoid the Apaches as their pursuers from Pueblo. A sudden rock slide nearly claimed two of their horses, sending cascades of stone tumbling into a deep ravine. As they calmed the frightened animals, Caroline noticed something odd about the pattern of the fall. Closer inspection revealed old timber supports, half-rotted and nearly invisible among the tumbled rocks. They had stumbled upon one of the Spanish mining operations mentioned in her father's notes. But was it the one they sought, or another dead end? Isaac's sharp eyes spotted the remains of an ancient trail leading up from the abandoned mine entrance. The path switched back and forth across the face of the cliff, climbing toward a natural shelf high above. Caroline consulted the map again, pulse quickening as she matched the terrain to one of her father's sketches. But Luke urged caution. The shelf would make them terribly exposed to anyone watching from the surrounding peaks. They made camp in a protected hollow, posting double watches through the night. Caroline found herself unable to sleep, her mind churning with questions. Had her father discovered this same site in his investigations? Was this why Eleanor had married Joshua Carter instead, to gain control of the mining empire needed to exploit such a find? And most troubling of all, what secrets had died with Nathan Hall that fateful night in Pueblo? The answer might lie in Eleanor's letter, now racing toward Tucson in a messenger's saddlebags. But Caroline knew they couldn't afford to wait for whatever revelations it might contain. The weather was turning, with heavy clouds building over the peaks. If they didn't find the lost mine soon, winter snows would trap them in these mountains, assuming Carter's men or the Apaches didn't find them first. Luke appeared silently beside her as she stood the dawn watch, his presence both reassuring and unsettling. "Your father was a good man," he said quietly. "He caught us fair and square. But what happened to him in Pueblo? That wasn't justice." Caroline nodded slowly, reading the truth in his eyes. Whatever game Eleanor Carter was playing, it had cost Nathan Hall his life. And now, his daughter would need both outlaws and enemies to uncover the truth hidden in these unforgiving mountains. The morning sun cast long shadows across the mining camp as Caroline Hall and her unlikely allies crouched behind a row of empty ore carts. The deafening echo of gunfire ricocheted off the mountain walls as Joshua Lopez's men exchanged shots with Nathan Carter's gang, who had followed their trail from Tucson. Caroline's fingers traced the worn edges of her father's map, now stained with blood and dirt from their arduous journey. Luke Allen peered through his brass spyglass at the ridge above, where Carter's men had taken position among the rocks. "They've got us pinned down good," he muttered, his Mexican accent thick with worry. "But they don't know about the old mining tunnels beneath their feet." His eyes met Caroline's, a silent understanding passing between them. The same tunnels marked on her map could be their salvation or their tomb. Eleanor Nelson, the mining camp's resident physician, worked frantically to stem the bleeding from Isaac Hall's shoulder wound. Caroline watched her brother's face grow paler by the minute, knowing they couldn't stay exposed much longer. The abandoned camp's weathered buildings offered little protection from the skilled marksmen above, and the morning's fog was quickly burning away. Joshua Lopez pulled a stick of dynamite from his satchel, a grim smile playing across his weathered features. "Your father may have put me in prison, señorita, but today we fight together, or die together." The irony wasn't lost on Caroline. The man her father had prosecuted 5 years ago was now their best hope for survival. The lost mine's treasure had brought them together, but survival had forged an unlikely bond. Through the chaos, Charlotte Carter's voice rang out from the ridge. "Surrender the map, Caroline. Your father stole it from our family, and you know it." The accusation struck deep. Caroline had discovered troubling evidence suggesting her father's prosecution of the Lopez gang had been built on manufactured evidence, all to protect the Carter family's claim to the mine. Rose Allen, Luke's sister and expert tracker, slipped silently between the buildings, gathering intelligence on their attackers' positions. Her skills, honed from years of surviving in the borderlands, had kept them alive this far. She returned with news that made Caroline's heart sink. More riders were approaching from the south, likely reinforcements for Carter's gang. The mining camp's old processing mill loomed behind them, its rusted machinery offering a potential stronghold. But reaching it meant crossing 30 yards of exposed ground. Joshua divided his remaining men into 2 groups, one to provide covering fire, the other to escort Caroline and her wounded brother to safety. The weight of leadership pressed heavy on Caroline's shoulders as she realized every decision could mean life or death. Caleb Nelson, Eleanor's husband and the camp's former foreman, emerged from the tunnels below with vital information. The underground passages were mostly intact, but several had collapsed, leaving only one viable escape route. It would take them dangerously close to Carter's position, but it was their best chance to outflank their attackers. As the gunfight intensified, Caroline made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden within the map's weathered folds was a second document, a confession written by Nathan Carter's father, admitting to the murder of the mine's original owner. The truth of the mine's ownership had been buried, along with its golden secrets, and now blood was being spilled to keep those secrets hidden. Joshua's men began their carefully coordinated movement toward the mill, using the ore carts as mobile cover. The sharp crack of rifles filled the air as Carter's gang tried to stop their advance. Caroline helped Eleanor support Isaac's weight as they waited for their moment to run. The map felt like it was burning a hole in her pocket, its secrets worth dying for to some, worth killing for to others. Rose spotted movement on the western ridge, unknown riders approaching fast. Through Luke's spyglass, Caroline recognized the dust-covered uniforms of the territorial rangers. The law was finally catching up to their desperate treasure hunt. But would they arrive in time to prevent more bloodshed? And whose side would they take when they learned the true story of corruption and betrayal? The next few moments passed in a blur of gunsmoke and adrenaline. Joshua's dynamite created the diversion they needed, sending Carter's men scrambling for cover. Caroline and her group sprinted for the mill, bullets kicking up dirt at their heels. Isaac stumbled, almost pulling them all down, but Luke appeared from nowhere to help carry him the final distance. Inside the mill, Caroline made a decision that would haunt her forever. She knew the mine's location, had memorized every detail of the map. In a moment of clarity, she realized the treasure wasn't worth the cost in human lives. As Joshua's men fortified their position, she took out her father's map and touched it to a lantern's flame. The secrets of the lost mine curled and blackened, carried away as ash on the hot desert wind. Nathan Carter's enraged howl echoed across the camp when he saw the map burning. His men charged the mill in a desperate assault, but Joshua's experience in defending impossible positions proved invaluable. The Mexican bandits, once her father's enemies, fought with unexpected loyalty to protect Caroline and her wounded brother. The arrival of the Rangers brought the battle to a swift end, but the aftermath would forever change the territory. Caroline's evidence of the Carter family's crimes, combined with proof of her father's misconduct, sparked a scandal that reached all the way to Tucson's highest offices. The lost mine remained lost, but a different kind of justice was found among the blood-stained rocks of the old mining camp. The aftermath of the battle left the old mining camp eerily silent, broken only by the crackle of dying fires and the distant cry of circling vultures. Caroline stood among the ruins of the mill, watching as the Rangers led Nathan Carter and his surviving men away in chains. Joshua's bandits, now vindicated by their actions, helped tend to the wounded while maintaining a cautious distance from the law enforcement that had once hunted them. In the makeshift infirmary, Caroline's brother fought for his life, his fever breaking only after 3 days of Eleanor's tireless care. The old Apache woman had appeared silently from the mountains during the battle's aftermath, bringing healing herbs and ancient knowledge that the town doctor admitted worked better than his own remedies. Through his delirium, he spoke of their father's final days and revelations that would reshape Caroline's understanding of the past. Joshua approached Caroline as she sorted through the documents they'd recovered from Carter's saddlebags. His face, weathered by years in the sun and marked by the recent fighting, carried a newfound respect that had replaced the initial mistrust between them. "Your father," he said quietly. "He gave us a chance in that courtroom. Could have sent us to the gallows, but he saw something worth saving." The papers revealed a complex web of corruption reaching beyond Nathan Carter to some of Tucson's most prominent citizens. Land deeds, forged documents, and letters detailing decades of theft and murder painted a picture of systematic exploitation that had enriched the territory's elite at the expense of both settlers and native tribes. Caroline recognized names she'd grown up respecting, including several who had attended her father's funeral with false tears. Rain came to the mountains that evening, an unseasonable downpour that washed away the blood and gun smoke. In the lamplight of the camp's main cabin, Caroline worked with Joshua and the Rangers to piece together the evidence. The lost mine, they discovered, had been a catalyst that exposed something far more valuable than gold. The truth about power and justice in the territory. Joshua's men, once notorious outlaws, were granted pardons in exchange for their testimony. The decision sparked controversy in Tucson's courts, but the evidence they provided proved instrumental in dismantling the corrupt network that had controlled the region. Caroline found herself defending men she'd once feared, understanding finally why her father had shown them mercy. The Apache elders, led by Eleanor, came down from their mountain strongholds to reclaim sacred sites that had been stolen through Carter's fraudulent deeds. Caroline watched as Joshua's men helped them restore ancient markers and clear debris from desecrated grounds. The collaboration between former enemies created an uneasy but hopeful peace in the territory. As autumn approached, the mining camp transformed. What had been a battlefield became a meeting place where different cultures cautiously learned to coexist. Caroline established a small law office in the restored mill, continuing her father's work with a deeper understanding of justice's complexity. Joshua's men, no longer bandits, found purpose as guides and protectors for legitimate mining operations. The legend of the lost mine faded into memory, but its legacy lived on in unexpected ways. The gold had never been the real treasure. It was the truth it had helped uncover and the bridges built between people who had once been enemies. Caroline often stood at the mill's window, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, knowing that some riches couldn't be measured in ounces or marked on any map. Winter came early to the high country that year, bringing snow that softened the harsh lines of the battle-scarred landscape. Caroline's brother recovered enough to return to Tucson, carrying evidence that would continue the work of reform. Joshua remained in the mountains with his men, their knowledge of the terrain proving invaluable to both settlers and tribes navigating the changing territory. The story of the prosecutor's daughter and the Mexican bandits became part of territorial lore, though few knew the full truth. In the end, Caroline realized that her father's greatest legacy wasn't the map he'd left her, but the example of looking beyond surface judgments to find justice in unexpected places. The mountains kept their secrets, but they had revealed something far more precious than gold: the possibility of redemption and the power of choosing right over easy. Caroline Hall stared at the imposing walls of the Tucson mine compound as the first rays of dawn painted the rocky cliffs in shades of amber and gold. The past week's desperate journey had led to this moment, a heavily fortified mining operation where her father's former prisoners now held the town's future in their calloused hands. Below, she could see Nathan Lopez and his men loading dynamite into the mineshaft entrances, preparing to collapse them if the Apache war party breached their hastily constructed defenses. Eleanor Nelson worked frantically in the makeshift infirmary, tending to the wounded townspeople who had fled here when the raids began. Her medical supplies were running dangerously low, but she kept her fears hidden behind a mask of calm efficiency as she changed bandages and administered what little morphine remained. The sound of hammering echoed through the canyon as the defenders reinforced the wooden barriers. Joshua Carter paced along the wall, his Winchester at the ready as he scanned the treacherous mountain passes. He had opposed Caroline's plan to free the Mexican bandits from the territorial prison, but now these same men were all that stood between the townspeople and certain death. The irony wasn't lost on him. His years as a lawman hadn't prepared him for allying with criminals to save innocent lives. The unlikely partnership between Caroline and Nathan had evolved from mutual distrust to grudging respect over the past days. Her father had sentenced him to 20 years for train robbery, but Nathan's intimate knowledge of these mountains and his leadership of the other convicts had proven invaluable. He understood the Apache warriors' tactics in ways the townspeople never could. Caleb Allen supervised the placement of water barrels and ammunition caches throughout the compound, his weathered face grim as he calculated their odds of survival. The mining operation's thick stone walls offered protection, but they were also a trap if the Apache managed to cut off their water supply or start fires. He had seen too many massacres in his years as a cavalry scout to be optimistic. The sound of distant war drums grew steadily louder as the morning progressed. Caroline joined Nathan at the highest observation point, studying the dust clouds that marked the Apache warriors' approach. "Your father was a fair man," Nathan said quietly. "He gave me a chance to speak at my trial. That's why I'm helping now. Not for the gold, but because justice works both ways." Luke Hall's last words to his daughter echoed in Caroline's mind. "The map leads to more than gold, Mihija. It shows the way to redemption." She hadn't understood then, but watching Nathan organize the defense of people who once feared and hated him, she began to grasp her father's deeper wisdom. Some treasures couldn't be measured in yellow metal. The first attack came at midday, a probing raid that tested their defenses from multiple directions. Nathan's men proved their worth, using their knowledge of guerrilla tactics to anticipate and counter each thrust. Joshua found himself fighting shoulder to shoulder with men he had once hunted, their shared purpose transcending old enmities. Eleanor worked tirelessly as casualties mounted, her hands steady even as exhaustion clouded her mind. Rose Carter, the schoolteacher's widow, assisted her, showing unexpected strength as she comforted the wounded and dying. The two women formed a bond that went beyond their different backgrounds, united by their determination to save as many lives as possible. The Apache warriors withdrew at sunset, but no one celebrated. Nathan gathered his lieutenants and the town leaders in the mine office, spreading out rough maps drawn on scraps of paper. "They'll try to smoke us out next," he explained, pointing to vulnerable areas. "We need to seal the lower tunnels and create escape routes through the higher passages." Throughout the night, men worked by lantern light to implement Nathan's plans. Caroline helped wherever she could, earning respect from both townspeople and former convicts. She discovered that leadership wasn't about authority but about bringing out the best in others. Another lesson her father had tried to teach her. The next day brought the expected fire attacks, but the defenders were ready. Teams of men and women worked together to extinguish blazing arrows and burning debris before they could spread. The Apache, frustrated by the unexpected level of resistance, intensified their assault as the sun reached its zenith. Isaac Lopez, Nathan's younger brother, led a desperate counterattack when the warriors breached one section of wall. The former train robber displayed incredible courage, rallying both townspeople and ex-convicts to drive back the attackers. His sacrifice in that moment forever changed how the town viewed the Lopez family. Charlotte Nelson coordinated the water distribution, keeping track of their dwindling supplies as the siege stretched into its third day. She had once been engaged to Joshua Carter before his duties as a lawman came between them. Now, working together to save the community, they rediscovered what they had lost. The turning point came when Josephine Allen spotted cavalry dust on the horizon. The Apache warriors, caught between the defending forces and approaching military reinforcements, gradually melted away into the mountains. The immediate danger passed, but the experience had permanently altered the town's social fabric. In the aftermath, Caroline made a decision that would have made her father proud. She revealed that the Lost Mine's entrance lay within the compound itself and proposed that its wealth be used to build a new future for both the town and the men who had saved it. Nathan Lopez, granted a full pardon for his actions, became a respected voice in the community's governance. The gold mine's discovery brought prosperity, but the real treasure was the transformation of enemies into allies and the breaking down of old prejudices. Eleanor and Rose established a proper hospital, while Joshua and Charlotte rekindled their relationship on new terms of mutual understanding and respect. Years later, Caroline would often visit her father's grave, telling him about how his final gift had changed not just her life, but an entire community. The map had indeed led to redemption, not through gold, but through the unlikely bonds forged in their darkest hour. Nathan Lopez and his men found their second chance, while the town discovered that justice and mercy could coexist. The story of Tucson's salvation became legend throughout the territory, not for the gold discovered, but for how it proved that people could transcend their past and find common ground in crisis. The mine compound stood as a testament to the power of forgiveness and the unexpected ways that destiny could unite former enemies in a common cause. As autumn painted the mountain slopes in amber and gold, Caroline found herself increasingly drawn to the transformed mine compound. What had once been a source of conflict now served as a meeting place where former adversaries gathered to share meals and stories. The old processing building had been converted into a community hall, its weathered timbers witnessing the gradual healing of deep-seated wounds. Nathan Lopez, who had once led his men in raids across the territory, now headed the mine's security detail, working alongside the very lawmen who had once pursued him. His knowledge of the mountain paths proved invaluable in establishing safe trade routes between Tucson and Pueblo, while his connections helped forge peaceful relationships with other formerly hostile groups in the region. Eleanor and Rose's hospital flourished, treating patients regardless of their background or past allegiances. The two women had developed a system combining traditional medicine with local healing practices, earning respect from both settlers and indigenous peoples. Their work became a model for other frontier settlements, proving that cooperation could accomplish what force had failed to achieve. Joshua, who had initially opposed Caroline's decision to work with Nathan's men, now served as the bridge between the old guard and the reformed outlaws. His marriage to Charlotte brought together families that had once been bitter enemies, their union symbolizing the broader reconciliation taking place throughout the community. Their first child was named Luke, honoring Charlotte's father who had died defending the town during the crisis. In Durango, word spread of Tucson's transformation, drawing curious visitors and those seeking a fresh start. Isaac and Caleb, once skeptical of change, became vocal advocates for second chances, sharing their experiences with neighboring communities struggling with similar conflicts. Their testimony helped shift attitudes throughout the territory. The mine itself, though never yielding the legendary riches promised by Caroline's inherited map, produced enough silver to sustain the community. More valuable than its ore was the lesson it taught about the true nature of wealth, found not in gold veins but in the bonds forged between people who had learned to see beyond their differences. Josephine, who had lost her husband in earlier conflicts, opened a school where children from all backgrounds studied together. The sight of former enemies' children sharing desks and playing together became a powerful symbol of how the next generation might break free from the cycles of violence that had plagued their parents. During the harsh winter months, when snow isolated the community, the mine's tunnels served as gathering places where stories were shared around warm fires. Old corridos about bandits and lawmen gave way to new songs celebrating unity and redemption. The mountain that had once harbored gold fever now echoed with laughter and music. Caroline documented these changes in letters to her friends in Wichita, describing how her father's final gift had catalyzed a transformation nobody could have predicted. The map, now framed in the community hall, served as a reminder that the most valuable discoveries often lead us down unexpected paths. As spring returned to the mountains, bringing new growth to the scarred landscape, the community gathered for its first annual Reconciliation Festival. Former adversaries danced together under strings of colored lights, while their children played games invented by mixing traditions from both sides of the border. The night air carried the mingled aromas of traditional dishes from different cultures, symbolic of how the community had learned to embrace its diverse heritage. The legend of the lost gold mine evolved into something far more meaningful, a story about how the search for treasure could lead people to discover their shared humanity. Visitors to Tucson often remarked on the unusual sight of former lawmen and bandits working side by side. Their past enmities transformed into strong friendships built on mutual respect and understanding. Years later, when asked about the true value of her father's legacy, Caroline would smile and gesture toward the thriving community. The map had indeed led to riches, she would say, but not the kind that could be measured in gold. The real treasure lay in the lessons learned about forgiveness, redemption, and the power of choosing reconciliation over revenge.